This week on Quality Digest Live, we talk about ISO 45001 and workplace safety with Ismael Belmarez, Accreditation Technical Manager for DNV GL Business Assurance, North America. If your company's motto is safety third, well then you will want to join us in 30 seconds. Welcome back to Quality Digest Live. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest. Listen to this. According to the International Labor Organization, around the world, every day 7,600 people die. That's every day. 7,600 people die from work-related accidents or diseases. That's over 2.78 million people every year. To address the issue, ISO has developed a standard, ISO 45001, Occupational Health and Safety Management Systems requirements that provides organizations with a framework to improve employee safety, reduce workplace risks, and create better and safer working conditions all over the world. And here to tell us a bit about ISO 45001 is Ismael Belmarez, Accreditation Technical Manager for DNV GL Business Assurance, North America. Hi, Ismael. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. Hi. Hi, Dirk. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. So just kind of briefly, a quick rundown of what, kind of the overview of what ISO 45001 is.
Okay. ISO 45001 is the management system standard that ISO developed for the occupational health and safety. So if you're familiar with some of the other management system standards like ISO 9001, ISO 14000, you'll recognize the framework in ISO 45001. It follows the same framework as the others. So if you're familiar with Annex SL, the format where there's 10 clauses and there's you basically identify the risks or the hazards, and then you go from there and have a system. It's the same standard, or it's the same format as the others. So this is the answer to, there was OSAS 18,000 in the past. This is the ISO 9000 now, ISO organization taking on that standard and developing the occupational health and safety standard in the same format as the previous management system standards.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. I've heard of the OSAS, OSHS, whatever, 18,001. So that wasn't an ISO standard then. That was just kind of roughly based on ISO standard, but it wasn't actually an ISO standard?
It was not an ISO standard. Basically, what had happened, it was not a developed or a well-developed system at the time. And this is back when it was developed originally. The OSAS standard. So ISO didn't take it on since it was not a mature system at the time. So what happened was that there were several organizations throughout the world that felt strongly about it. So they developed OSAS to kind of as the answer and having a standard, but it was outside. Now, it took on very similar formatting as ISO 14,000. So a lot of people assumed that it was part of ISO at that time, but in reality it wasn't. And then also the standards get revised at a certain period of time. So in this case, OSAS, the last time it was revised in 2007, so it was basically time to revise it. At this point in time, ISO felt that it was a mature enough system that they now became part of an actual ISO standard. So now it's become an ISO standard. So now it's time to migrate everything over from OSAS, OSAS to ISO 45001.
Okay. Now, the question I'm going to ask is kind of a question I ask a lot of times because it certainly came up a lot with ISO 9001 in the early years. ISO 45001 is essentially it's a process framework, right? It doesn't actually tell you how to make your workplace safer and so forth. So I'm always interested in how you draw the connection between a framework or a process management or whatever you want to call it to the actual nuts and bolts of lockout, tag out, or you got to wear steel-toed shoes or a hard hat or whatever.
Yeah.
How do you actually draw the connection between these two things? The actual shop floor, boots on the floor versus this nebulous kind of framework or process.
Okay. The main requirements of the OSA, the ISO 45001, is you have to identify the hazards and also the risk associated with any organization. The hazards, it's basically you have to eliminate all hazards. So if something's obviously wrong, say a frayed wire, electrical wire, that has to be replaced. So there's no question about that. But then there are risks. So there are certain risks, say a tripping hazard, or there's a possibility of something falling on somebody's foot, so to speak. So now, say you identify that risk. You need to have something to protect your feet. You're minimizing, or then you have to minimize those risks. How do you lower that risk so people don't get hurt? Well, you require steel boots or safety shoes. Same thing with lockout and tagout. If you're in a space and there's a risk that if you get trapped in there, something could really seriously go wrong, then there's a lockout tagout that there's no way that is mitigating your risk or lowering the risk of that person getting hurt. So basically you start off with, identifying your hazards and risks. And so this is where, it's just a framework. You will then identify your hazards and risks for your organization, which will vary greatly depending on the type of organization you are. If you're talking about an office environment, your risks are still, let's say electrical hazards could still be tripping hazards. But if you're at a chemical facility, your hazards and risks are much higher. But once you identify hazards, like I said, they have to be fixed immediately. Any risks, then you have to mitigate those risks. What are your risks? How high are those risks, and what are you going to do to prevent them? So your mitigating factors are your hard hats, are your safety training, are your safety work boots. So those are the bottom line, or at the end of the day, what people need to do. But you identify those way ahead of time and minimize those risks.
And can you give maybe I don't know, is there something from the news, or is there something, an example that kind of might show how, look, maybe if this company had ISO 45001 in place, they might have saved a life or might have avoided this tragic accident or whatever. Is there something that might come to mind? This happens on a daily basis. And it could be anything from somebody getting caught in an oven or in a confined space, that if they had identified that, then they would have had a lockout tagout system. That if that is an immediate concern, or having a buddy system, those are mitigating factors. Now, or actions that you take to minimize the risks. Somebody falling off of electrical power line. What you do is, of course, your risk avoidance or your risk minimizing is having harnesses in place, so you do not fall to the ground in case of an electrical issue. Or you're working up in heights. Again, you have identified that as a risk that you may fall. So to try to avoid that, because you still need to do the work, is to have the mitigating factor as having a harness or something that will prevent you from falling. So it sounds like the standard helps you think about and identify all of the sources of potential danger, safety hazards. It's kind of a rigorous way to make you look at what your organization does, every aspect of it, and to determine where those risks might be. Would that be a good way of putting it? It just kind of focuses your attention.
Definitely, because the first thing that the standard requires is that you identify all your hazards and identify all your risks. From that, then you have to identify plans to eliminate the hazards and minimize the risks. And those are things that get audited on the day, audited by the CBs or even your own internal audits. You're looking at how to minimize those. And there's also some performance requirements. One of the things that it requires is goals and objectives. What are your goals and objectives? If you're looking at to try to minimize the incidents, then that's being looked at. Again, if you look at the standard itself, if there is an incident, you have to do basically what referred to as a corrective action. You have to find the root cause, the correction to that issue, and then also a root corrective action so it doesn't happen again.
And imagine here, obviously here in the States we've got OSHA, other countries have got their own safety organizations. Would having ISO 45001, or at least having gone through the process of getting registered to ISO 45001, does that help you comply with OSHA requirements or help you pass an OSHA audit? I mean, does that contribute in some way? Does OSHA even care, for that matter?
At this point in time, they do care. Of course, it's not accepted in lieu of or anything like that, but it will put you in much better position to be able to answer those questions. The other thing is OSHA here in the U.S. is looking at the bottom line as far as how many incidents, how many things have occurred. If you're following a management system for occupational health and safety, then those things will be minimized, so you'll have less scrutiny. The other part of that is there is a requirement in the standard itself that you comply, that you do an audit of the compliance, of your compliance and your regulations. So one part of that is identifying all the possible laws and regulations, whether they be at the federal, state, or local level, that you need to comply with when it comes to safety of the individuals. So, one of the things that the standard ISO 45001 that's a little bit different from the others is that it also requires employee involvement. Again, this is occupational health and safety of the employees. So part of that, when it talks about leadership, it's also talking about employee participation and employee involvement all the way from the beginning of the system to the end. So, when the other standards kind of require you that management, basically develop a system, in this one it's talking about, and the reason for that, it has to have the employee buy-in. You can set up whatever system you want, but the employees need to, understand that this standard is for their own well-being.
We mentioned earlier OSAS 18001. If people are already on OSAS 18001, and they want to move over to ISO 45001, is there some sort of transition pathway? Are there deadlines? Are these two connected in any way, or are they basically going to start from scratch and just go for ISO 45001?
No. In this particular case, when ISO 45001 was issued, also what they called IAF, or International Accreditation Forum, mandatory document 21 and 22 were issued. They kind of give the guidance for the accreditation of ISO 45001, and it also talks about OSAS, and that OSAS itself will be obsoleted in 3 years from when the ISO 45001 was issued, which basically brings up the March 11th, 2021, March 11th, March 12th, 2021 as a deadline. The individuals that are certified to, or organizations that are certified to 18001 must migrate over, and they're using the term migration since it is, going from one type of standard OSAS over to a different ISO 45001. So the migration must be completed by that date. Most of the time, it'll be a one-day adder as a minimum, which I think will become more of a standard. 1 day added to whatever audit is being performed for OSAS to migrate that organization over to ISO 45001.
Okay. And I'm sure you're going to cover this actually on a webinar that you have coming up that we're doing, Quality Digest and DNV. We're doing a webinar next week on this very topic, ISO 45001. Can you maybe give us a teaser of what you expect to cover in that webinar?
It'll be the main changes from OSAS 18,000 over to ISO 45001. A big part of that change will be the the employee involvement in this. Like I was mentioning just a few minutes ago, was one of the things that this standard varies a little bit from the others is the employee involvement. And what I mean by that is all the way from the beginning all the way to the end. So during that webinar, we will cover those type of information of what's required to convert over, what evidence the certification bodies will be looking for during the transition or the conversion over. So that's the type of information that will be covered. And then, of course, we'll go through the entire, the layout of the standard, which is different from OSAS, just because it had to comply with Annex SL. So if you're familiar with ISO 9001, ISO 14000, you'll kind of recognize the
high-level structure.
For the format, yes, the high-level structure required.
Got it. Well, your employees' safety is important, so you don't want to miss this webinar that Ish was just talking about, helping manage workplace safety for business success. Are you in? That's the name of the webinar. That will be Tuesday, Tuesday, April 9th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, and Ish and I will be there. He will be the smart one saying smart things, and I'll be there just taking your questions. So there's a link right underneath the player page. You can click that. That'll take you out to the registration page where you can sign up. So Ismael Belmarez, thanks for joining us here on Quality Digest Live.
Okay, it was a pleasure.
Awesome, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, see.
All right, so that is it for today's show. As usual, if there is someone or some topic that you would like to see on the show, just let us know. Send your suggestions to us at qdl@qualitydigest.com, and we'll try to bring those people or those things or those topics or whatever it is. Pet dog, I'll bring them on the show. Thanks for joining us today. We will see you next week. So long.